Good morning, everybody. I just wanted to welcome you to HCAM and thank you for coming in on behalf of the Hingham Business Council and Hingham Community Access and Media. Welcome and thank you for coming this morning to this event. We are here today. We're going to have a conversation with the candidates getting ready for the November 8th election. And these are the candidates who are going to be seeking election to replace State Representative Garrett Bradley's seat coming up. So we have Joe Moschino on my far, camera right, and then on this side here we've got Kristen Arut. And then in between them, we've got Stan Blackmer, who's going to be doing sort of the moderation and kind of, keeping the conversation moving in this conversation with the candidates. Stan is here as a lifelong resident of Hingham and with ancestors dating back to the original settlers here. He's the owner and publisher of South Shore Magazine since January of 2000. And he is the lead host and producer of the South Shore Live radio since July of 2009. He's also a realtor with Coldwell Banker. So before we turn it over to the program, I just wanted to also recognize two guests that are here with special ties to either the Hingham Business Council or the Chamber, and that is Al McDonald from South Shore Health Systems, formerly South Shore Hospital. He is the incoming chair of the South Shore Chamber. And then we also have John Mannion from South Shore Bank, who is the vice chair of the Hingham Business Council. So thank you both, and thank you everyone for attending. Just from HCAM really quick, I'll just thank you all for coming to our new facility. We've only been in this configuration as you see it since really the beginning of October. So I appreciate your patience as we kind of work with some of these new systems to get everything working. I hope you got a chance to walk through and take a look at our facilities and see some of the capabilities of what are here and what we can do for guests or members or people from the community who want to make media here in Hingham. So with that said, I'll turn the program over. I will just caution everybody to be careful as you move through the semi-darkened studio with any of the cables that might be crossing the floors. All right, but with that said, I'll hand it over to Stan.
All right, well, thank you for coming this morning. Again, I'm Stan Blackmer. We're here for the Hingham Business Council's conversation with the candidates for state representative position, Joan and Kristen. We're going to do approximately a 50-minute conversation between the two of you with different topics. I'll kind of facilitate and not necessarily moderate the event, but we'll give equal time to both candidates, and we have a variety of topics that we will be discussing. So let's kick off the show with each of you giving a bio of yourself. Joan, why don't you start?
Well, so first of all, I'd just like to thank the Chamber for having both of us in. We always appreciate the opportunity to talk a little bit about myself and my campaign and my candidacy, what I bring to the role and how I might serve the community. So it's really terrific that you've done this. So I'm Joan Moschino, and I'm very excited to be running for state representative for 3rd Plymouth, which includes most of Hingham, all of Hull and Cohasset, and precinct in North Scituate. I believe I have the leadership experience, the relationships, the perspective on our district, but most importantly, the commitment to be the advocate for the South Shore on Beacon Hill. Whatever the topic might be, jobs or healthcare or education, my local elected experience, my nonprofit executive experience make me uniquely qualified to work with municipal and civic leaders like yourselves to tackle the issues that are most important to the South Shore. And I will be a tireless advocate for issues that are important to the South Shore, things like jobs and infrastructure improvements, regional strategies to mitigate sea level rise and climate change, as well as to strengthen economic development and make sure we have vibrant downtown centers here in our district. Just a little bit about myself. My husband and I do live in Hull, I was born and raised there, and I really do understand the issues that are important to the South Shore, because this is where I'm from and this is where I've been most engaged in the community. Public service is something that has always been important in my life. I served 6 years, 2 terms as a selectman at Hull, and since that time I've actually continued to represent the town of Hull on regional boards and statewide commissions. Our Regional Planning Association, MAPC, I'm on their executive committee for the past 10 years, the Metropolitan Beaches Commission, and the Hull Capital Outlay Committee. And just so everyone knows, I am actually a lawyer. But for the past 8 years, I've been a nonprofit CEO. I've run a small business, a small nonprofit that promotes equal rights and opportunities for Massachusetts residents. And through that work and other engagement in law, I have actually seen the positive impact that I can make on Beacon Hill. So really, that's how I view the role of the state rep, as your advocate. And I really just want to thank you again for the opportunity to discuss the issues that are important to our district, in particular around the chamber and economic development. So thank you so much for having me in here, and please consider voting for me on November 8th.
All right, thank you very much, Joan. Kristen Arut, your little background about yourself?
Sure. Excuse me, I have a little trouble with my throat this morning. Thank you to the Chamber. Thank you to Eric for actually tackling our names and pronouncing them properly. Not too many people can do that. I think we have the most complicated race in terms of last names. My name is Kristen Arut. I've been in Hingham for 25 years, grew up in Norwell, so I've been on the South Shore my entire life. I have 2 children who went through the Hingham school system. One is currently living in South Boston, along with every other 20-something-year-old college graduate, and working as a web art director at Talbot, so I'm very proud of her. The other, my son, is a sophomore at Northeastern. He's a finance major. They've both been very active in my campaign, which has been exciting. This is my first time running for an office, so it's really nice to have my family support and to be able to tap into them as a talent and a resource. My background is in education, elder affairs, and running a small business. I have a degree in education. I've worked as a remedial math instructor in local school systems on the South Shore, and I've been a private math tutor for the past 13 years. I was helpful or worked with the End Common Core movement. I believe very strongly in reducing high-stakes testing. I think it's wreaked havoc on our school system, and hopefully we'll be able to talk about that a little bit more later. I'm also currently working with an elderly woman who has Alzheimer's. When I started managing her personal, legal, and financial affairs 2 years ago, I discovered that she'd been defrauded by her financial advisor. So in the course of seeking restitution for her, I've learned quite a bit about how we can improve our elder care laws to protect seniors from financial fraud and other things. I'm also currently a member of the Hingham Council on Aging as well. And I did run a small business. For 13 years, I ran a small home-based childcare business that opened my eyes to the role, the effect that government can have on small business, both its growth and its and new fledgling businesses starting up. So that experience was very eye-opening for me as well. This role as state rep would be a full-time job for me. Managing the personal, legal, and financial affairs of this elderly woman is a part-time job that I do on the side. So being state rep would be a full-time job for me, and I'm excited. I feel as though I was wired for this. I've been a very strong advocate for people over the course of my life in different capacities. I won't go into detail, but that's something that I feel very strongly about, is making sure that we are listening to people, especially people in need, and doing what we can do for them. And volunteerism has always been an important part of my life. I've been volunteering in churches and schools and in my community as well for as long as I can remember. My parents are still very active in church and community as well, so that's something that's been ingrained in me since childhood. So I appreciate this opportunity, and thank you, Stan, for moderating.
All right, well, that's a great background information on both of you. We're going to jump into the next category, which is going to be the cost of employees block. Each of you will have about 5 minutes. The cost of employees block, just some of the talking points would be mandating sick leave, minimum pay, possibly profit sharing, and how these elements create a disincentive to hire employees and may cause local businesses or regional businesses to rely more on computers or office automation. So Joan, we'll stay in the same order. Why don't you kick this off with the cost of employees block?
Well, so I think some of the things that you sort of started with in terms of things like minimum pay, mandatory sick leave, is actually important to support small businesses. And so I should just back up and say a little bit. So I actually have run a small business. Massachusetts Appleseed Center for Law and Justice is a nonprofit, and I ran it, or built it, and ran it for about 8 years. And so I do really understand the challenges, payroll taxes and complying with a lot of the new laws that have been coming down around mandatory minimum pay and sick leave and time off. And while some of these things are very complicated to manage for small businesses, at the end of the day, they're actually really important for small businesses. I think when people talk to me about things like minimum payment or minimum salaries, in fact, I think raising those minimums are actually really important to keeping our community vibrant. One of the things I thought was very interesting about the South Shore Chamber's report that came out earlier in the year was that our workforce here on the South Shore is actually highly educated and underutilized. And I think that what we really need to be focusing on are things to engage that workforce and innovation type jobs, things that are here in the district. Right now, one of the big challenges we have as a community is that most people are attracted to jobs in Boston, and they actually have to commute. Has anybody tried to drive into the city recently? I mean, the congestion in our district is actually really a tough thing to navigate, and it makes getting to work really hard. And we can talk about some of the infrastructure improvements
Yeah, we're
and
going to talk about that in a later.
And why those things are important. But one of the other pieces I think that we should be talking about is how we create jobs here in the district and attract people to live in the district, attract people to stay here in the jobs and create those. And some of those strategies are by providing things like part-time jobs, flexible schedules for moms coming back into the workforce, elevating those minimum pays. And the other thing we do know is that when you elevate pay and you put more money in local people's pockets, they also spend it locally. So I think that a lot of the strategies to really bolster our workforce we shouldn't do them quickly, we shouldn't do them, we should be thoughtful about how we do them, and we should implement things over time, but we have to get there to make sure that we have the workforce we need for the small businesses here in our district, and so that we can keep those businesses vibrant. They are absolutely core to having vital downtown centers, and it's really we're talking about is growing the middle class again. So I actually think those kinds of strategies are absolutely vital to our economic diversity and health.
Okay, great, Joan. Thank you very much. Kristen, your response to this segment?
Well, I differ greatly from my opponent in terms of government mandates and regulation, in terms of how they could possibly invigorate the economy. I think that when it comes to small business in particular, placing things like required sick leave, a required minimum wage on employers actually does the exact opposite of what my opponent just described. It becomes costly and unwieldy for small business owners to run their businesses. And I'll just give an example. When I ran my childcare business, in order for me to grow my business based on the Department of Early Education and Care's requirements, I had to take on an aide. And if there were a minimum wage requirement for me to take on an aide, it would have been cost prohibitive for me to expand my business. Because the amount of money that I could have brought in by taking on additional children and families based on my space would have not covered the cost of an employee and all the incentives for that employee. So that's just one small example, but I believe that that translates to other industries as well. I also think that employers should be able to create their own standards. So if an employer wants to have incentives for employees, that should be up to that employer. It shouldn't be a government mandated thing. If an employer provides a desirable benefit package or a wage that is a competitive wage compared to its competition, then I think that that's something that would be appealing to potential employees and would effectively grow that individual's business. So that's my perspective
Okay.
on that question.
Well, I would just, but let's discuss it because, I think when we're talking about competition, it's one thing to say, you did a cost-benefit analysis around your business and made a choice to close it or to expand or whatever your choices were. But I think at the end of the day, what some of these requirements are doing is making sure that the everyday worker isn't taken advantage of. Most people, especially in a down economy, don't have that many options, and most people don't have a lot of savings. So, getting people to a fair wage, to a living wage, actually saves us money and time and energy over the long term. Because what we saw during the down economy, and I was a selectman 2004 to 2010, so I saw it in our community across the board. As soon as revenues started dropping, as soon as people started losing work, and it hit at the highest levels. People just didn't have the savings, and had to expend on safety nets, to just make sure that people weren't homeless. It was shocking, and so I think that in terms of long-term strategies for our region's economic health, I want to go back and just say, I do think that what might affect an individual business and your personal experience is one thing, but to look to see how we strengthen economies over time, how we strengthen families, and how we make sure that people still have money in their pockets to spend locally. I think that that's the starting point for most of the conversation, and how we should think about our diverse economic health in our district, because the fact of the matter is that we have Route 3A that goes straight from Boston right down to the Cape, and what we bring in and how we attract people spending money here, I think makes a big difference.
Okay. Kristen, you want to respond to that?
Yeah, I'll just quickly respond if you don't mind. So I guess the point that I'm trying to make is that taking money from employers by mandating a minimum wage or requiring sick leave or requiring all types of benefits does not benefit the employer. So if we're looking to expand job opportunities, we're looking to make desirable sets of circumstances for employers to build their businesses and grow their businesses, and government mandates do not do that.
So we do really disagree, because at the end of the day, what I'm saying is you're going to attract a better level of employee. You're going to encourage people to, get the education, to come and stay and to work with you and to make long-term commitments. So I guess we do fundamentally disagree on that one.
Okay. Well, I think we've got each other's opinions pretty strongly on both sides of that issue. Let's move on to the infrastructure block. And I wanted to also promote the South Shore Chamber of Commerce's South Shore 2030 Choosing Our Future study that was done over the last several years, talking about infrastructure, transportation, energy, water, wastewater, tourism, and community development. There are copies available here in the studio today, or you can find that online at the South Shore Chamber of Commerce.org. There's copies of that report on there. But let's jump into this infrastructure block. Again, each of you will have about 5 minutes. Sort of talking points would be the MBTA, highway system, seawalls, and availability of water and sewer, either through the MWRA or local sources. Again, we'll stick to the same order. Joan, why don't you go first?
Sure, thank you. It's actually a great question, especially for candidates for state government. The role of government is really, in my mind, to draw in and invest the resources in our community that are going to make for good quality of life and that are going to attract not only residents but the appropriate types of small business. And you mentioned the T. Transportation is actually one of the critical ones. I mentioned earlier about business and trying to alleviate congestion. So right now, Boston is one of our major economic magnets. I mean, that's our big economic center for our region. And most people commute into the city. I can't remember the numbers, but it's actually a shocking amount of people that actually go into Boston every day for work. And you need to be able to get there with reliable public transportation. I think anybody who's driven through the Braintree Split will know that it is just, it's almost traumatic trying to drive there. I'll do anything to avoid it. And that's why we absolutely have to have safe, reliable, robust public transit that is good ferry schedules, that is reliable train and T schedules. And those are the kinds of investments that government can make at the state level that really will make for a better community for us. You look at the Greenbush line, and it's underutilized. We put it in there, and they've struggled to get the ridership up. Part of that reason of that is because there's actually a choke point, which once you get up towards Savin Hill, we really need a double track. And then what you'll see is then it won't be competing with the Kingston line or the Braintree, the Red Line, to get into the city. And once you have a more reliable, robust schedule, people will go in, and it absolutely has to be safe. The same thing with our roadways. Especially within our district, there are any number of private and state-run roadways, and getting the money to pave them, to make sure that they are safe, it's expensive. It's like $1 million a mile. So those are the kinds of things that government absolutely can invest in. And when we say highways, it should also be local roads. I think that the 3A corridor really could use some attention in terms of traffic and flow, and Route 53 as well. That definitely could do a better job at flow of traffic and to really encourage people to come in. The other piece of transportation are transit-oriented developments. We've got the Greenbush line, and you've seen, I'll use Cohasset as an example. The Cohasset station, there's a lovely transit-oriented development that has grown there and flourished, and that's the kind of investment that we can be making, and there's other opportunities along the Greenbush line where you can see business drawn to it. And interestingly enough, there's a wonderful, it's called the Workstation in there, and there's a wonderful innovation center where people can go and start their own businesses and use that as a place to foster a new economy, which is something I think we should be nurturing. You also mentioned sewer and water. That is probably going to be the single most significant determinant as to what kind of business we can draw into our district and how much business and economic development. Just using the Patrick administration have been trying to draw in a lot of pharma. It's water-based. You don't have water, you don't have pharmaceutical companies doing research and development. Residents as well. It just happens we live in a highly stressed basin, and every time a development comes online, they have to do the equation of whether or not they can capture the water. And so it's going to be things like that that will cap or will encourage business. So we absolutely have to be thinking about the water and the sewer. And lastly, you did mention seawalls. For better or for worse, we are coastal communities, and we've armored our beaches and our coastline. And we're going to have to invest in seawalls, and it's one of the most expensive things we can build. But using Hingham as an example, I think Hull's pretty obvious in terms of sea level rise, but has anyone started thinking about the fact that Hingham's downtown center, how close that is to its harbor? And I actually heard the Hingham planner at a presentation yesterday, and she talked about the fact that if we don't be mindful of adaptation and resiliency, Hingham Town Center will be underwater in a matter of years. So I think that as far as the role of government goes, that is probably the most significant thing that the state representative can do, is to advocate for the resources that we can invest in our community that will support and attract the appropriate kinds of business development that we want here.
Okay, great. Thank you very much, Joan. Kristen, MBTA, highways, seawalls, MWA, water, sewer. What are your thoughts on this topic?
Well, starting off first with water and sewer, I know I live in South Hingham, so I know that water is a very real issue. It's been a very real issue recently with the drought that we've had. Accessibility to water has been a problem. We need to be thinking of creative solutions to that. God forbid we have another drought of the capacity that we've had, or something that's even more extensive in the near future. But water is definitely something, the access to water is definitely an issue. And it's clean and potable water, so it's a very different kind of thing from electricity, for example, where it's just a matter of getting that resource to people's homes, which is still a task in and of itself. But water, we're concerned about cleanliness, and we're concerned about accessibility. In terms of highways and the MBTA system, my husband takes the MBTA every day. He parks in Braintree, and he takes the train into Boston. Reliability is a huge issue with the T. Parking is a huge issue with the T. If we can't get a handle on our current infrastructure, then we shouldn't be talking about expanding it. The Greenbush line, I had a conversation just recently with somebody about the Greenbush line in particular, and one of the issues of the Greenbush line and its lack of use is the fact that it's not reliable. The times are reliable, but it's not run frequently enough. So it's almost like the Greenbush line hasn't defined itself yet. We don't know if it's for weekend travel, if it's for commuters, if it's for people who are working late. If you work past 6 o'clock, then you're in a real bind when it comes to the Greenbush line. A lot of young working families would love to rely on public transportation, but they can't, because accessibility to home and to your children's daycare is very important to them. So we need to have a reliable, accessible, and clean MBTA system in order for people to want to take advantage of it, and also deal with the parking issues that we have as well. I think the other thing too is that we need to get a handle. Joan just mentioned the remote workstation that's popped up in Cohasset. As I've been going door to door, I've been finding a lot of people home. A lot of people are working remotely from home. So we do have a changing jobscape as well. Some people are working from home exclusively. Some people are working from home part-time. Some people travel. So that whole concept of commuting into Boston every day is kind of an antiquated one. So we need to get a real handle on the jobscape here on the South Shore, the types of jobs that we're trying, or types of businesses that we're trying to attract, and the actual commuting habits of the people who live on the South Shore and would be attracted to moving here. As far as Route 3A and Route 53, I know that there's a Route 3A corridor study, and we all know the traffic on 3A is just terrible. The traffic on 53, I live right near 53, used to live right near 3A, now I live near 53, is just terrible on both, and there doesn't seem to be a good time of day to be traveling on those roads. But there are issues beyond just the traffic on the roads that need to be taken into account. For example, there's a stretch in Cohasset where if they were to expand the roads or improve the roads, we would have to be then encroaching on property that people are currently using for parking because it's technically owned by the state. So in order to revamp those roads and improve those roads, it would mean impacting on the local businesses that are right along that corridor. So that's something that people are holding off on doing specifically because of that, because of the impact that it will have on small business. Route 53, the same thing, except Route 53 is a highly residential area. So we need to be, concerned about homeowners in that area. And then just in terms of overall appeal of the South Shore, I was thinking this morning as I was getting ready for this debate about the fact that I have 2 children who are in their early 20s. When I was my daughter's age, I was a homeowner. There's absolutely no way my daughter, with her crushing college debt, could be a homeowner right now. Not only are real estate prices through the roof, certainly, significantly greater than when I was her age, but she has a tremendous amount of debt, and the job opportunities that are out there are limited for people her age, graduating from college. She's one of the fortunate ones, but I know many of my friends have children who are looking for full-time jobs, and they're cobbling together part-time jobs just to make an income for themselves. So it's a very different dynamic, a very different climate. So if we're talking about creating an environment that's appealing not just to business, but to workers, potential people who would live in our area, work in our area, commute to local businesses for work, we need to be thinking more broadly in terms of the cost of college and how that's prohibitive to starting off a life once you graduate from college, and also the cost of real estate as well. Those are 2 huge impacting factors on the growth and development in our area.
Okay.
So just going back to something that Kristen raised, which I actually think is very interesting, millennials. They confound me, but they also delight me. And one of the things that we do know is that millennials want to work and live sort of in the same place, that they're drawn to downtown areas, to the city, because they like to walk, they like to have everything sort of right there at hand. And I actually think that this is one of the opportunities that we have to attract to young people back to our district. If you've looked at the demographics recently through the Chamber's report, you know that the South Shore is graying, and that in fact I think it's 20% of the population here are over 65, which is really surprised me when I started running again and started looking to see how and if things had changed recently. But I think if we want to have to preserve sort of the community, nature, and sort of the wonderful spirit of each of our towns, I think it's important that we have diverse age groups. That we have seniors, that we have people like ourselves, sort of midlife, but also these young people, and attracting them back. As Kristen was pointing out, that's also your workforce that we want to make sure that they can be here, that they can earn a decent wage, that they can afford to rent an apartment or to get that starter home, and that they're here. And so, this focus on downtown centers and really creating and revitalizing the things that attracted all of us to stay here. We grew up here, but we all stayed, and we all came back and stayed after we went off to school. So I think that the millennials, and focusing on creating these vibrant downtown centers, which, back to your question about infrastructure, also includes things like walking and biking, and then getting around our district as well. I don't know if you plan to ask any questions about sort of tourism, but the unique nature of our coastal communities and happens to make it very attractive. And I've always been of the opinion that Hull happens to have a hotel as does, well, not really, it's a small hotel, boutique, but Cohasset Center. And what a lovely ability to spend, say, a long weekend down in Hingham Center or Cohasset Center, Hull at the beach, or even over in Situate. And I think that that's another piece that we have to be very careful to nurture and to make sure that we're attracting these young people and the millennials. And I think that's our opportunity that we should be focused on.
Okay, Kristen, real quickly.
Quickly
Yeah.
comment on that, because you and
Yeah.
I have millennials. We have a couple of millennials in our families. They don't want to come back to Hingham. They don't want to come back to the South Shore until they're ready to put down roots. So my daughter is currently living in South Boston because that's where all the millennials choose to go. South Boston, North End, someplace in town. And she's doing the reverse commute. So she's coming down 3A and she works as a web art director at Talbot's. So I appreciate everything that you just said, because I do believe that my daughter and her friends are very much interested in having nightlife and restaurants and accessibility to parks and things like that, but in the context of an urban setting. And then when it's time to set down roots and become, a more permanent fixture in an environment, then I think that's when they're looking to return to the South Shore. At least that's been my experience.
Okay, great. We're moving right along time-wise, so wanted to focus next is, we're going to call it the business environmental block. This would focus on workforce development, which again was significantly reported in the South Shore Chamber of Commerce 2030 Choosing Our Future study. So be workforce development, training. Again, it's kind of touching back on our first topic a little bit, so let's not go over that too much, the mandatory sick leave, minimum wage. But then attracting business to the South Shore, for instance, with tax credits. What types of businesses do you think that would be a good fit here on the South Shore if there were to be tax credits put forward? So again, workforce development, training, regulations, attracting businesses to the South Shore in any factor or via tax credits, and who would you guys identify as those types of businesses? Joan, why don't you go first?
Well, interesting. So throughout the campaign, you knock on doors and you get to meet a lot of people. And the one that I heard about, which hadn't occurred to me before, was actually film. Tax credits for bringing in film productions. And I think that, I hope that, Southfield, what's it called now?
Union
I'm sorry, thank you,
Point.
Union Point.
Yep.
I thought that was really brilliant, that they would utilize some of the space there for filming, and I think that is actually a tremendous idea. There's a lot of artists and a lot of creativity down here on the South Shore, and I hadn't even realized it until you really knock the doors and you meet people, and so I think that that's actually one that could take advantage not only of potential facilities here on the South Shore, but also the quaint, picturesque landscape. We've already attracted some interest over past years, and so I actually think that focusing on films could be a really good one for the South Shore as well. Actually, going back to the discussion about the innovation, I'd like to see more opportunities around the innovation centers pop up. This is, as we had talked about a little bit before, a highly educated workforce, underutilized, underemployed, and I think that there's just a lot of creativity and opportunity for people to start their own businesses, and for the state to nurture that. I don't know about tax credits. We'd have to see what came out of that in terms of the innovation, but I think that this could be a place where we could really attract people, create these vital centers, and bring them back into the downtowns. We know that downtowns thrive when there are good restaurants and shops and things like that, and that tourism component that I was talking about and referenced a little bit earlier is another piece. You know, you come into the city, and I know when I travel, and I've heard a lot of people sort of say it in Boston as well, is, you know, what's outside of Boston? How do I get there? And I think that connecting the businesses on the South Shore with Boston, and making sure that they don't just skip right past us to the Cape, that we draw those people in. That's revenue dollars straight into our district, and I think it's an important piece. As far, you know, your question overarching was about workforce development. You know, investing in our public schools is absolutely a priority. Setting aside workforce development, I just firmly believe we owe it to every child within our district to start them out right in life, whatever their path might be. And you know, as far as setting them onto college, you know, there are a number of other paths as well. You know, I happen to be visiting at the South Shore Vocational Technical School this weekend, and what a wonderful, robust program that they have there to get young people into the trades, into culinary, into cosmetology, and into graphic design. And so programs like that, I think, absolutely are really critical, absolutely critical. And also working with the unions. I don't know if most people even realize this, but that unions do a lot of their own apprentice and training and workforce development as well, you know, and that's going to be absolutely critical for developments like, not Southfield,
Union Point.
Union Points, thank you.
Excuse
It's
me.
going to be absolutely critical for you know, building out places like Union Point or the shipyard. We're going to have a lot of construction needs as well, and then of course every child should head on to college. And you know, Kristen talked about a little bit, but making sure that it's absolutely affordable and that we're not saddling kids with debt and sinking them in debt, I think is absolutely going to be a priority.
Okay, great. Kristen, you're up.
Okay, thank you. Well, I think in terms of developing our workforce and expanding businesses and you know, creating a vibrant economy here on the South Shore, we need to be thinking in terms of what businesses are a good fit for the South Shore, because obviously there are certain things that aren't going to be a good match for whatever reason, for one reason or another. You know, we are a bit off the beaten path, so people do hop on Route 3 and directly go down to the Cape. They have, you know, summer places down on the Cape, beaches. Obviously, there's an appeal. There's a reason people travel to the Cape. And it's also a very seasonal community. I own property on the Cape, and I can tell you that once September 5th or whatever, the day after Labor Day rolls around, there's nobody down there. That's actually the most beautiful time to be down on the Cape. So in terms of thinking about developing our local economy and creating a more appealing environment for businesses, I think we need to be thinking not in terms of tourism per se, because I think that's a little idealistic, but I think we need to be thinking in terms of appealing to the people who live here, work here, raise their families here. What types of things are appealing to them? Hingham has a lovely downtown area with lots of shops that are set up, lots of small businesses. People love to go downtown, grab a cup of coffee, grab a sandwich for lunch, poke around in the shops. It's easily accessible, easily walkable. And so in terms of types of businesses that are appealing that will draw people in, I think we need to be thinking in terms of small businesses like that, little niche markets, little startups. We need to be thinking in terms of restaurants. We've all seen the huge success of the Derby Street shops and the huge success of the shipyard over in the Crow Point area of Hingham. And that's because, for one, parking is not an issue. You know, in our downtown areas, parking is definitely a very real issue. So parking is not an issue, but it's also a one-stop shopping kind of deal. So if we can develop those sort of one-stop shopping types of environments for people here on the South Shore, people who live here on the South Shore and people who work here on the South Shore, I think that would be very appealing. I also think that given our aging population, we need to be thinking in terms of assisted living facilities and affordability of assisted living facilities. People who've lived in this community their entire lives, who've contributed to this community their entire lives. It's a real shame when those people have to move out of this community. So assisted living is something that is a tremendous need, certainly affordable assisted living, or even just senior housing, not necessarily assisted living, but definitely senior housing, which I know encroaches on the topic of housing, but in terms of business, assisted living is certainly a business that can be built up and made accessible to our aging population so people can stay close to their families and close to the environment that they grew up in. So again, we need to be thinking in terms of parking as an issue. We need to be thinking in terms of encouraging people to shop locally by encouraging small businesses to pop up. And then we can also be thinking in terms of creative transportation as another small business. Uber is something that's very accessible here on the South Shore, could be more accessible. I know that when I met with the directors of the Councils on Aging a few weeks ago to do a little brainstorming on issues that affect our senior community, and in particular the Councils on Aging, transportation was the #1 issue. And so they were talking about thinking creatively, thinking outside the box so we can have more on-demand transportation services, sort of taxi-like services for seniors to get them to appointments or in emergency situations. While the transportation system has been fantastic and has worked well for most, it's definitely something that could be improved upon, and I think the private sector could step in and assist with that.
Okay.
Well, I just wanted to go back to, in terms of attracting businesses, it's also about the businesses that are here. And so I'm mindful that, Al McDonald's here in South Shore Hospital. So we do actually have some pretty significant core anchor businesses here in our district now. And so, one of the thoughts that I had is that we do have Quincy Community College, but we don't really have our own sort of community college within. And I know that that's been a discussion point about attracting a campus to be more local within our larger South Shore district. And I just wanted to toss that out there because we've both expressed concerns about affordability for college educations, and we really have the best higher education system statewide, bar none. I mean, the UMass system and the other statewide, the other state community colleges and universities. And I think that would be an interesting one to start to have a little bit of look at and to see what we could attract down here. And it's around things like, aides in the nursing homes that we have here, or the visiting nurses, or South Shore Hospital. So I just wanted to toss that out as a critical point
Okay.
as well.
Kristen, I'll give you a quick response to that, and then we've got to move on to a couple of other items. So.
Well, again, I think we need to be thinking in terms of infrastructure, we need to be thinking in terms of parking, and we need to be thinking in terms of land if we're talking about doing something that large scale. I know a lot of the aides who work at the local assisted living facilities and nursing homes do the reverse commute, similar to my daughter. They rely on public transportation, though. So making public transportation more accessible, if we're going to do something as large scale as a community college here on the South Shore, we need to be thinking in terms of students who are commuting, making commuting options more accessible to them. So I think while I appreciate that as a suggestion that's put out there, I think it's a lot to tackle.
Okay. Next talking point is going to be about Union Point. It's the largest regional development project currently underway in the Northeast. Hingham has a very small sliver of the property there. It's mostly in Weymouth and Abington. What do you feel, how can Hingham take advantage of the project going on at Union Point?
Oh, I think it's actually really exciting. So even if Hingham didn't physically have a piece of it, its proximity and the housing that it's going to have there, I mean, that's, we're talking about, supporting small businesses and just people in proximity to our businesses in Hull and Hingham and Cohasset and Scituate. So I actually think that that is very exciting. I've been a little worried about the pace of it, but now that it's back underway and it's been moving forward and developing nicely, I think that's really exciting. One of the things that I think our delegation we should be pushing for as a whole South Shore is to make sure that that the roadways and the connectivity are actually robust. There's a few spots where it just seems like if you just connected Union Point with, say, Derby, or just to make sure that there's throughways and connectivity so that it's actually easy to get out of Union Point and into our district. I think that would be really tremendous. And of course, they'll have a commuter rail stop there, which will give reason to bring people down to the South Shore and to spend money in our district. So I actually think that that the state rep, that our South Shore delegation should be supporting smart growth there and making sure that we leverage the connectivity there, both so that we can access whatever shops and amenities are there, but also so that those people can come down and enjoy Hingham Center or enjoy Hull Beachfront or Cohasset Center. I think it's a great opportunity for us.
Okay, great. Kristen, your thoughts on the Union Point?
Well, I think it's already looking very promising in terms of manufacturing coming in, and as Joan mentioned, the infrastructure being tied into it with the T station and accessibility to Route 3. I think we need to be very careful when we're considering future development that we take into consideration the impact that additional cars on the road, additional folks traveling in our district is going to have. And there's always that balance. There's always trying to find that balance between growth and development and managing our current infrastructure. So we don't want to overburden our area. I think we need to take things slowly and really carefully consider any new proposals that come in. But I think manufacturing is a great idea. I know that, as was mentioned before, film has come in, and there's a lot there where some filming has taken place, so I think that's fantastic as well. So I'm looking forward to seeing the other potential projects on the slate.
Okay, in the essence of time, we've got about 5 minutes left, and I think this is one of the most important parts of this discussion here. The Hingham Business Council's conversation with the candidates. Personal agenda. What is your number 1, 2, and 3 priorities if you were elected, and where might we see you partner with the opposite party? So you get 2.5 minutes each on this. This is the only highly timed section.
I actually already mentioned my priorities at the beginning. So I do think that the number 1 issue that we need to keep in mind and address in our district is climate change and sea level rise. Everything we do should be thinking about that reality coming, and even though I say that as a crisis, as a problem, an issue, it's also an opportunity for people. Start a solar company, like whatever. It's equal part issue we have to deal with as well as opportunity. The other pieces are infrastructure and investing in our infrastructure, whether it be roads, seawalls, or schools. And then thirdly is economic development and jobs creation to maintain robust downtown economic centers. I think that's absolutely imperative for us to be able to weather downturns in the economy in the future. I was a selectman right when the economy tanked, and I can tell you that that will be a significant priority for me once I get in there.
Okay, great. Kristen, your thoughts on your number 1, 2, and 3 priorities if you were elected?
Well, I know that Governor Baker has been doing a fantastic job reaching across the aisle. He's set a priority for himself and his administration to make sure that he takes a look at issues and concerns that are nonpartisan issues and concerns. And I really appreciate that about him and his administration. And I can also see, as we have all seen, that he's made tremendous strides, especially given the fact that our party, the Republican Party, is the minority on Beacon Hill. So I appreciate the fact that he's already set that standard for reaching across the aisle, and I hope to continue that when I get to Beacon Hill. My top 3 priorities, I would have to say, are elder affairs, local control of education, and returning funding to our communities for creative solutions to some of the issues that we have. And just real quickly, in terms of elder affairs, as I mentioned before, we need to tighten our elder abuse statute to protect our seniors from financial fraud. That's something that can be done on day one. There shouldn't be any real discussion about it in terms of controversy. It should be something that we should all be able to reach an agreement on. As a matter of fact, there is a state rep on Beacon Hill who's a Democrat that I've been in touch with, and this is an issue that's near and dear to his heart as well. So I believe that it's a nonpartisan and should be a bipartisan issue. Local control of education, as I touched on earlier, I think standardized testing has gotten completely out of control. I'm opposed to Common Core. I was opposed to the implementation of Common Core. It was disappointing to see how that ballot question ended in terms of not being placed on the ballot because there was a lot of support for ending Common Core and returning to our high standards, the standards that we had in Massachusetts prior to the implementation of Common Core. Test scores are declining. It's wreaking havoc basically on our schools and our teachers, and I think it's unfortunate. So I would like to see the return of education to local control, and that's where our communities have the best handle on the needs of our teachers and our students anyway. So I think that that's important. And then finally, restoring funding to local communities for creative solutions. Senator Patrick O'Connor was just recently pivotal in getting some funding for the purchase of a dewatering pump, which I think is fantastic. I just thought that was the coolest thing. Like, what a creative solution. So the dewatering pump was purchased by Duxbury, Scituate, and Marshfield. And essentially what it is it's a pump that's going to be housed in the Duxbury Fire Department. And when roadways, due to coastal flooding, become flooded, in particular in the winter when the threat of that water freezing and becoming a hazard, when that becomes a problem, this dewatering pump can literally come in and just suck the water off the streets. What a creative solution that is. So while we're talking in very broad and painting with very broad strokes, I think we need to be talking in terms of very creative solutions and really dealing with the fundamental issues that we face here on the South Shore. So those are my top 3.
Okay. Well, I guess we've pretty much run out of time. I want to thank the Hingham Business Council for putting this on, conversation with the candidates for state representative, Joan Machino and Kristen Root. Election is, as we said, 13 days away, so hopefully this program today will help facilitate our viewers into making their decisions on Election Day, or the ability to vote early, as you both mentioned, has been very busy in all of the communities. So best of luck to the both of you, and thank you very much for viewing.
Good luck.
Thank you.
Thank
You
you.
too. Thanks, Dan.